Welcome, and thank you for joining us for our Women in Solar webcast series. Our panel discussion today is focused on energy policy, and we'll highlight some pathways into policy work, some issues our panelists are working on, and some opportunities for women to make a big impact in this field. My name is Kathleen Monahan, and I'm the Senior Programs Director here at Grid Alternatives. It's an honor to be here today with our four esteemed panelists. Before I introduce them, I do want to spend a few moments telling you a bit about Grid Alternatives and our Women in Solar webcast series. Grid Alternatives is a nonprofit organization working to bring the benefits of renewable energy to underserved communities. We install solar electric systems exclusively for the benefit of low-income families using a volunteer and job trainee-based installation model. Grid Alternatives' long-term vision is really a move to a renewable energy future that includes everyone. In order to make that happen, we're very engaged with working with low-income families, veterans, tribal nations, bringing more women and historically underrepresented communities into our work. So today's webcast series is part of a national Women in Solar initiative we launched in partnership with SunEdison with the goal to bring more women into the solar industry and support their professional growth. Our previous webcast recordings are all available on our website, as well as more information about the partnership, and that's gridalternatives.org/women. And finally, our topic today on energy policy coincides nicely with the recent release of our low-income solar policy guidebook. Grid Alternatives worked in tandem with Vote Solar and the Center for Social Inclusion to develop a policy guidebook on effective strategies to increase low-income solar access in all 50 states. You can check that out online at lowincomesolar.org. So moving into today's panel, we have gotten so many questions in the past about careers and energy policy. And so I'm so excited to be moderating today's discussion with four leaders in this field. So please join me in welcoming our panelists today. We have Melissa Charles, who's the Supervisor of Emerging Procurement Strategies at the California Public Utilities Commission. Stephanie Chen is the Energy and Telecommunications Policy Director at the Green Lining Institute. Melanie Santiago Mosier is the Director of Government Affairs for the Midwest and Southeast regions at SunEdison. And Jessica Scott is the Regional Director of the Interior West region for Vote Solar. So thank you so much to each of our panelists for your time in participating today. And for the viewers, I want to invite you to use the live question and answer feature on the right-hand side of your Hangout if you'd like to ask any of the panelists questions. And we will save some time at the end of the hour today for those audience questions. So I'm going to kick things off today by just asking each of our panelists to introduce yourselves and tell us a bit about your career. Melissa, we'll start with you. You could just tell us a bit about your position and organization and the career pathway that led you to your current role.
Great, thank you, Kathleen, and thank you to Grid Alternatives. My position, as Kathleen mentioned, is Supervisor of the Emerging Procurement Strategies section in Energy Division at the CPUC. And what the California Public Utilities Commission does is we regulate, among other things, the privately owned electric and gas utilities. Our primary mission is to make sure that customers of those utilities have safe, reliable, and affordable electric service. Another primary mission for us is to develop and oversee clean energy programs, and we do a number of clean energy programs. The CPUC is a five-body commission. We have judges, we have attorneys, what Energy Division does is we support the decision makers, who are the administrative law judges and the 5 commissioners, and provide technical advisory services to them. So we make recommendations on program design. We oversee the implementation of programs. In terms of my career path, it's actually a little bit circuitous. I didn't start out in energy. I got my MBA from USF a few years back, and at that time, I had started out, wanting to go into business, make money, all of that, and throughout my process in going to grad school, I realized I was interested in making an impact. It's something that is very strongly indoctrinated in my family, and I had discovered the digital divide. I was working on telecommunications issues at USF, and that was when I wanted to see how business and serving the public could work together. I graduated very shortly before the dot-com bust, and jobs were very difficult to come by in terms of business. And so what I ended up doing is I was going to Boston and doing a fellowship in healthcare with the Haitian community. I did that for a year and a half. I came back to California, became a consultant for nonprofits, and it was all kinds of nonprofits, both in public health, in communications, but also in the environment. And that's when I became interested in sustainability and energy. So I did that for a few years, and then I had heard of the CPUC when I was in grad school, so I decided to look at it again. And this is in 2006. And there was a bit of a hiring boom at that time, and they had work in energy. And I was hired to work on low-income programs. And one of my first projects was to help design the low-income solar program, which is now the SASH program, which Grid is the program manager for. And that's when I first became aware and started working with Grid Alternatives. And then basically it will be almost 10 years that I'm here. And it's interesting because I did not originally mean to go into government, but this particular agency has been able to marry all the things that I've wanted in terms of working both in energy policy, but also working with business and helping to support markets, working with nonprofits and advocates such as Grid Alternatives. And we work on a variety of different things. So I started out in solar, worked with the California Solar Initiative for many years, worked as an advisor to commissioners, last couple of years worked in energy storage, and now what I'm overseeing is transportation electrification, broad GHG policy, and Senate Bill 350 combined heat and power programs, a number of different programs, which I'll talk about a little bit more later.
Thank you, Melissa. Stephanie?
Thanks, Kathleen. My name is Stephanie Chen, and I'm the Director of Energy and Telecommunications Policy for the Greenlining Institute. Greenlining is a racial equity advocate. We are a nonprofit organization, and we advocate for policies that bring better economic opportunities to communities of color, primarily in California, but also nationwide. So what that looks like in the energy space is, I think, very similar to what Grid Alternatives is doing, making sure that communities of color who are unfortunately disproportionately lower and moderate income households have access to energy efficiency, have access to solar, have access to all of the fancy things that Valicia is working on making sure are available on the market. Greenlining wants to make sure that our communities don't have to wait decades for those technologies to be available and affordable in our communities. We want to make sure that those benefits are available to us now. And I think in particular, with respect to renewable energy, communities of color live in more polluted areas disproportionately. And so the benefits of cleaning up our energy generation, the benefits of reducing pollution, really accrue disproportionately to the communities that live in those polluted areas. So that's kind of, in a nutshell, what we do here. How I got here, I think, was also a little bit accidental. I went to college and to law school always being very interested in how race and class differences play into society and make differences in our outcomes that really shouldn't be there. You know, if we are supposed to all have equal opportunity, then race and class shouldn't have any effect in terms of throwing up barriers to people, and we know that all too often they do. So I was attracted to the Greenlanding Institute for that reason, and then they said, you're going to be working on energy and telecom, and I said, what? So it was a little bit, it was a little accidental, but I think particularly working in California policy, it's been a really interesting time to be in both of these arenas, since particularly on the energy side, California is very policy forward. We are pushing more than any other state in the nation, or more than the country itself, towards renewable energy, towards energy efficiency, towards greenhouse gas reductions. So it's been a really exciting time to work in those areas with respect to how race and class make a difference in those policy areas.
Thank you, Stephanie. Very interesting. Melanie, we'll go to you next.
Great. Thank you, Kathleen. And hi, everyone. It's great to be a participant today. Thank you so much for having me. My name is Melanie Santiago Mosier, and I'm a Regional Government Affairs Director for SunEdison, a global renewable energy developer. As Kathleen mentioned before, SunEdison is very proud to be a partner with Grid Alternatives, and it's really exciting that through our RISE initiative, we managed to train 2,800 different people from, women and communities of color to enter the solar field and to participate in this amazing economy that we're creating. In my role at SunEdison, I cover public policy affairs, mainly in the legislative arena. I cover those affairs in 19 different states, plus the District of Columbia. So you're going to hear a common theme here. I also had a very circuitous route to getting to where I am today. So my career aspirations actually started while I was an undergrad. My senior year of college, I interned in a small lobbying practice here in Maryland, and getting into that work, it was really interesting, really exciting, and I knew that that's what I wanted to do going forward. I decided to become a lawyer because I thought for me personally that would be very, very helpful in pursuing a public policy career going forward. So after law school, after I graduated, I went to work for the Maryland General Assembly, and I served as counsel and a policy analyst there for 2 years. And that's when the energy bug hit me. I was able to be a part of an interesting project that related to electricity rates and a potential huge electricity rate spike in Maryland because of some restructuring issues. And I immediately grabbed on it. It was immediately fascinating to me. So that's how I really got this electricity energy bug in my system. That kind of led me to a career at the Public Service Commission. So, like Milicia, I worked at the Maryland Public Service Commission for 4 years, but my role there was as the legislative director for the commission. So I represented the commission before the state legislature and before Congress on a number of different issues, but also had the opportunity to really learn the workings of the Public Service Commission and understand how the commissioners think and how they work behind the scenes. So that was very cool. After 4 years at the Public Service Commission, I entered the private sector, and I've been really enjoying what I've been doing there in the private sector for the last about 5 years. It's regulatory work, it's legislative work, and all of the things that go into all of that. Most of my work for the last 5 years in the private arena has centered on energy, and in particular, a lot of that has been centered on clean energy. I absolutely love this work. There is never a dull moment, and there is so much opportunity to do more good things going forward, including, building on the work that Grid has already been doing, and other organizations like the Greenlanding Institute and like Vote Solar. So many great organizations doing such great work out there.
Thank you, Melanie. And Jessica.
Thank you, Kathleen, and thank you to Grid for hosting the Women in Solar webcasts. Similar to this theme, I did not come into solar energy policy through a traditional background. My background is actually in biology, and my very first job out of college was working in the microelectronics development lab at Sandia National Labs in New Mexico. I was recruited because my life science lab skills were transferable to semiconductor manufacturing. It was a great experience and I really learned a lot, but I was drawn to environmental education. So I actually spent several years as the Ecology and Environment Gallery Leader at the St. Louis Science Center before moving on to be Director of Environmental Sustainability for a community college district. And while I was there, I was awarded a grant from the county to launch a solar energy training program. And through that experience, I became a solar energy advocate and an advocate for green jobs. I was later brought on by the Denver Mayor's Office to be their solar program coordinator, which evolved into being a sustainability strategist, and then later an air quality administrator for the Department of Environmental Health. During my time at the city, I helped create a local government working group that was focused on intervening in energy dockets at the Public Utilities Commission. So through that work, I was introduced to Vote Solar, and I'm now honored to be part of their incredible team of rock stars. I'm based in Colorado, but I work on state solar policy throughout the interior West.
Great. Thank you, Jessica, and thank you, panelists. Really interesting histories and backgrounds and stories to your current positions. I found that very interesting. Well, I know, a lot of our viewers are equally interested in a career in policy. Anyone want to take a stab at telling us about a couple of things you might be working on? And I think folks are really interested in kind of, what's it really like? So, what's a day in the life, sort of your typical work day or work week?
Well, I can kick us off. I think two projects that Greenlining is working on that I'm particularly excited about. One is California recently passed legislation that would deploy a whole bunch of rooftop solar on low-income affordable housing. And so we're working on what's the best way to get the most bang out of those bucks, what's the best way to make sure that benefits accrue to tenants as much as possible, and what's the best way to make sure that as a building owner wants to put solar up on their roof, that they have as easy a time as possible in working their way through the details of signing up for the program. So that's one that I'm particularly excited about. Another is the possibility that we may be able to bring some affordable community solar into California. And the idea behind community solar is that if you don't own your roof, or if your roof is shaded, or if, for any other reason you can't put solar up on your own roof, what I would love to see is let's put up a solar installation on the public library, on the local Boys and Girls Club, on the church down the street, and then let's allow neighborhood residents to sign up for a share of that installation and receive a share of those benefits. So there's lower barriers to entry for folks who don't want to put it up on their roof or can't put it up on their roof, but folks are still able to participate. And I like the idea of the community feel behind it and really getting the whole community involved. So we're hoping to bring some of those policies to scale in California in a way that's affordable for folks, for regular working Californians. In terms of a day in the life, I think it really varies from time to time. We'll participate in regulatory proceedings, which involves a lot of research and writing and data and persuasion in a more academic, technical sense. But I think a lot of what's fun about solar policy in particular is, even though the technology has been around forever, it is sort of coming into fashion right now. And so in a lot of senses, to the average consumer or to the average decision maker, it may feel like more of an emerging technology. So a lot of what I think we do is sort of sell that vision, right? Paint a picture of what the world could look like if we are generating our electricity in a 100% clean, 100% emissions-free manner, if we're doing it in our neighborhoods, if we're doing it in our own backyards. So a lot of what I do, in addition to the technical research of, okay, how do we get this to work in real life, is really trying to sell that vision to the people who are decision makers and can make it actually happen.
Great.
I can go next. So I'll talk about Senate Bill 350, which I referred to before. It's also legislation that was passed last year. And what it did was set a 2030 GHG greenhouse gas reduction target. And to meet that target, it required the state to procure 50% renewables, double our energy efficiency savings, and also encourage widespread transportation electrification, so EVs and other technologies. And so for what it means for the Commission is that it touches upon a number of the programs we have. We have a lot of aggressive clean energy programs and policies, including the California Solar Initiative for rooftop solar. We have a renewables portfolio standard. We have various EV programs. And so this kind of takes it to the next level. And it requires internally a lot of coordination. So the various program managers and section leads like myself have to internally coordinate. We have to coordinate across proceedings with various commissioners and the judges. So it's actually been an exciting time, but it's definitely, we have a lot of questions and challenges. In terms of a day in the life, it means a day in my life is often interagency meetings. So a lot of the legislative mandates like SB 350 are not only requirements for the CPUC, but it's also for the California Energy Commission. It's also for the Air Resources Board, so we do a lot of interagency coordination. Stephanie mentioned being persuasive and talking persuasively to decision makers. A lot of our time can be spent in meetings with people like Stephanie, with Grid Alternatives and other parties to proceedings to understand their points of view, because the PUC has a public process. We do solicit feedback from stakeholders such as Greenlining and Grid Alternatives. Here I have a list of other things we do. We also write briefing papers, make proposals to decision makers, so we do our own persuading internally, and then we also do a lot of presenting like today and a lot of external outreach in terms of communicating our policies to wider audiences.
Thank you, Melissa.
I'll jump in next. I think Stephanie and Melissa really hit on one thing that I think is really a constant in this work, even though no 2 days really are very much alike, and it's all about communication. So I often joke that 15-year-old Melanie would love this job because I'm on the phone a lot of the time. And we can laugh about that. You're all laughing because you know what I'm talking about. But it's really true, but it really gets to what the heart of public policy work is all about. It's about that communication. It's about communicating with your coalition partners to build your strategy. It's effective and persuasive communication with policymakers to advocate for what you want to accomplish. And then about 50% of my time actually is internal communications within my own organization to make sure that my internal stakeholders have a say in what's going on and also understand what's going on around them. So that's really this constant theme that I think you're hearing about, what might a day in the life be like? What form that communication takes can be any number of things. Melissa and Stephanie talked about regulatory filings and proceedings. So that is definitely something that can take up a day or two here or there. Another day you might be walking the halls of the legislature and having meetings with legislators. Really no 2 days are alike in terms of the form that your communication takes. In terms of some issues that I'm working on, like some of our other panelists, I'm working on community solar. I've spent about 8 months or so getting a community solar pilot program up and running in Maryland. This is a real labor of love for me. And in particular, I'm really excited that our program here in Maryland has a specific piece dedicated to making sure that low and moderate income customers are served in this program. So it's really exciting to see that come to fruition. We've got a little ways to go, but that's another thing that I'm working on. There are other pending issues, any number of different issues that we can work on. But for example, I've been working on tax policy and utility planning in the Southeast to try to open up those markets. I've been working on renewable portfolio standards in states like Illinois and Maryland, again, to try to break open those markets for solar. So really there's a lot of variety in terms of different types of issues to work on.
Thank you.
Yeah, there's definitely a common theme of stakeholder engagement and coalition building. I think that a career in energy policy really does require a lot of communication with a lot of different parties. My territory covers Arizona, Colorado, Nevada, and New Mexico. And Colorado is an example of a state that decided to preserve net metering after doing a comprehensive investigation over a long period of time. Nevada, on the other hand, recently decided to effectively shut down the residential solar market after a very rushed and expedited discussion of net metering. So I'm now spending most of my time working with stakeholders in Nevada to find a long-term policy solution. Vote Solar has filed a petition for judicial review of the PUCN decision, and I also serve on the Distributed Generation and Storage Technical Advisory Group for the governor's New Energy Industry Task Force. And while Colorado's net metering decision was a tremendous solar victory, solar advocates are now inundated with an enormous number of filings, which will determine the energy future for Colorado. So that's keeping us all pretty busy as well.
Thank you, Jessica, and thank you for mentioning the Colorado and Nevada recent developments. I think that's a good segue kind of into the next question. I just wanted to kind of address some of the what our panelists might see as some challenges and also some opportunities for women that are entering or currently in the policy field. I know for me, with so much going on in the policy world and so much growth in solar, just how you kind of navigate all those changes is an area of interest.
I'm happy to jump in on this. I think that when you compare the number of women working in solar policy compared to sales or installation, for example, I think that women are actually fairly equitably represented within policy. I think the gender gap becomes more apparent when you start looking at expert witnesses and policy leaders. And there is research to support a confidence gap between men and women. So women are more likely to underestimate their skills, and some men are more likely to be overconfident. And in policy, I think overconfidence can actually be a hindrance because it blinds you to other perspectives and other ways of thinking. I think women in solar policy, and I'm including myself in this, need to keep pushing themselves to take on leadership positions, even when that feels uncomfortable, simply because the end result, in my opinion, is better informed solar policy.
Thanks.
I'll jump in next. I completely agree with everything that was just said. I think a big challenge for women in solar policy lies with helping others to do what I call seeing through the pinstripes. So there's a movie that starred Leonardo DiCaprio called Catch Me If You Can. And in that movie, there was a line that a character said that says, "You know why the Yankees always win? It's because the other teams can't stop looking at those pinstripes." And you do encounter that, and I think that really goes to the point about the confidence gaps. Those pinstripes can be a lot of things and can really draw people's attention, and you've got to navigate away and make people see your beautifully tailored suit that isn't just pinstripes. And so the pinstripes can be a lot of things. So as one example, there are always characters in the public policy arena who are going to be loud, they're going to be brash, they're going to talk a good game, but they don't necessarily know what they're talking about. So it can be a challenge to make your audience appreciate what you're talking about and understand your substance, the real thing that you're talking about, and get beyond that big talk and that big swagger. So I agree, this can be more of an issue for women than for men. And, I don't necessarily advocate taking on that swaggering attitude, but I do think it's a challenge, and I think it's something for us to recognize. But, again, what I would advocate for here in this regard is that you become a trusted advisor. You become somebody who knows what you're talking about and always speaks truthfully, so that when a policymaker is trying to see through the pinstripes, they know to come to you because you're wearing a beautifully tailored suit that is made up of very solid policy positions and well-reasoned substance for what you're advocating for. Another type of pinstripe that we encounter in the public policy arena, frankly, is related to political contributions. And that is a very tough thing for policymakers to get beyond. So you have to figure out how to get beyond those dollars that your opponent may be able to spend that you simply can't spend. And again, it's getting to that substance, showing your beautifully tailored, wonderfully made suit that is made up of substance and not just something artificial. That being said, I do think that we have an opportunity to create pinstripes, to put a little flair on from now and then. And I do think that we can do things to draw attention to ourselves, never forgetting, though, that it's really that substance and the really important core of what we want to get to that we really want to make sure that policymakers understand. In terms of opportunities in the policy arena, I think the opportunities are absolutely endless. I mean, you can do almost anything that supports a public policy initiative. There are opportunities to be a community organizer. There are opportunities to affect policy from a legal strategy. There are opportunities in the legislative and regulatory arenas. Research and quantitative analysis is extremely important for supporting public policy work. So, it really runs the gamut.
Thank you, Melanie, and thank you for the analogy. That was fantastic. Let's see, any other comments on any challenges or opportunities? And then I have love to hear what you guys are, the next big thing you're planning on working on.
I think, sorry.
Go ahead. Okay, thanks. Great. These are great comments, which I completely support and agree. And being on the policymaker side of things, I completely agree with Melanie in terms of, speaking truthfully, speaking with substance. Having been an advisor to a commissioner, you spend a lot of time taking a lot of meetings. People are speaking at you, and you do have to kind of sift through some of the noise. And so making sure that if you are on the other side of the table, to make sure that you are bringing substance, that you are speaking truthfully, and you're bringing something meaningful to the table. In terms of an opportunity, I do have to sort of make a plug because the CPC is hiring, and we're going to have a bunch of positions coming. So I did want to, since I understand that this is a rather large audience and some people may be looking for jobs, I do encourage you to go on the CPC website to see what opportunities are coming down the pike. Our process is very governmental and rather complicated, and does need a little, if you need some help with that, I did also want to encourage you to email Energy Division at energydivisionrecruiting@cpc.ca.gov. Feel free to give them my name, and if you get my contact information, feel free to reach out to me. I'm happy to talk people through the process. So that's my spiel.
Thank you, Melissa. Oh, so Stephanie, anything further on that one?
Yeah, just a couple quick thoughts. I think I very much agree with everything that has been said about becoming that trusted resource, becoming that resource that brings substance and value and not just the distracting pinstripes. I think that goes very far in terms of the long term. One thing that I will throw out there is that we've seen some companies that have been inclined, as their company is kind of the new hot thing and ready to grow and trying to grow as fast as they can, as much as possible, we've seen them sort of resort to what they feel is the safer type of representative, which would be, typically male, typically Caucasian type of individual, because they see that as kind of being the safer bet. And I think that we do have an additional challenge oftentimes as women and as people of color in showing that we bring something not just that is different than that candidate does, but that is better than that candidate does. And one thing that I would say in terms of opportunities is when it comes to solar policy, so much of how much solar we get out there has to do with customer uptake and has to do with whether customers say, I think this is a good decision for me, I'm going to go forward with it. And many, if not the vast majority of consumer decisions are made or heavily influenced by women in this country. We are the driving force behind American consumerism. And so I think that there is a great degree to which women being in the position to design the policy, to design the way that the outreach outreach is done can really make a difference in terms of reaching that target audience in the way that solar industry wants to reach them.
Thank you, Stephanie. Great point. Good point. So looking ahead here, ladies, what is sort of the next big thing you're looking at working on that you're excited about? For those of you who work and cover big regions of the country and a lot of states, are there any states that you're particularly enthusiastic about, anything going on that are for our audience, or just anything your organization might be tackling or would like to tackle in the upcoming years that you think is important?
I don't think this is a new focus. I think it's just an increased and growing focus, in that the solar industry cannot achieve full success until we help turn energy from a source of harm, which it has been historically, into a source of opportunity for those communities that have suffered most. I'm extremely excited that Vote Solar is in the process of hiring its first position dedicated to low-income solar policy. And Kathleen mentioned that Vote Solar and GRID worked with the Center for Social Inclusion to publish a low-income solar policy guide. And it's something that's personal for me because I grew up in poverty. And I really believe that all families should benefit from the transformative promise of clean energy, regardless of their economic or social background, and that until we can really achieve equity within the solar industry, we need to keep working on policies that increase accessibility.
Thanks, Jessica.
I will echo what Jessica just said. You know, I'm very much excited to continue working on policies that will increase access to solar for many, many more communities and families. And in my core, I also believe that we as an industry need to build upon the amazing work that organizations like Grid Alternatives and the Green Lining Institute and others have already done in this arena. It's a big challenge, but it's something that we need to take on. It's the right thing to do, and we can do it going forward. So, you know, in that regard, we need to work on things like outreach and education for low-income customers, because as a group, they have learned not to trust something that sounds like it's too good to be true. And unfortunately, solar is so good in so many ways that I think we're going to encounter some skepticism going along the way. So we really have to figure out ways to get beyond that skepticism. We also need to work on broader policies that incent developers to serve low-income communities. So, you know, we can create public financing mechanisms, and we can do more to create the platform for community solar across the country. And we need to be sure that the very real economic benefits of solar also don't interfere with income-based benefits that customers get or energy assistance-based programs that are already in place. So there are some very complicated things that need to be worked on, but I'm really excited to dig into all of that, and I know that there's so many in the industry who are excited to join us.
Thanks.
So I think both Jessica and Melanie touched on something that Green Lining is particularly excited about, which is breaking sort of this financing ceiling. For a lot of particularly low and moderate income households, they may have a solar suitable roof, they may own their roof, their bills may pencil out to show that solar is a good opportunity, but they may have not the greatest credit score. I think, a lot of folks, particularly in communities of color, were hit pretty hard by the recession, and credit scores have taken a particularly big hit, and we know how long it takes to clean up your credit score after something like that. And so lenders often can be kind of hesitant to lend or to finance a deal for solar for a lower moderate income household because of some of those traditional credit mechanisms. And it may be that this person pays their mortgage every month on time, pays their utility bills every month on time. It's just that their credit score doesn't necessarily reflect some of that real financial reliability. So what I think we're particularly interested in is finding a way to break through that sort of traditional notion of financing and what is a finance-worthy candidate when it comes to a solar investment.
Great. So sort of a green bank idea here in California or something.
Yeah, I think it could take a number of different forms. There's a lot of great ideas out on the table. There are some models in other states and other countries that we can take a look at. It's really, I think, again, just a question of convincing all of the different players that would need to be involved in that program that this is the right way to move forward.
Great. Thank you. Melissa, anything you'd like to add on that? And I guess I should just add some context for the viewers. I think we would note, again, California has been so progressive in its focus on low income and inclusive solar policies, and the CPUC has been really tasked with implementing those programs and really expanding them over time. But anything that's on the horizon that you're particularly excited about over in the Energy Division?
Yeah, to your point, and to my earlier point about SB 350, one of the key provisions is that there is a priority on the impact of clean energy programs and policies on disadvantaged communities. And one of those provisions is also looking at how we consider disadvantaged communities in our resource planning. So as we procure solar and other sorts of generation, including conventional generation, how does that impact disadvantaged communities? And as you mentioned, we have a number of low-income programs, which I'm personally very proud of, and that have great impact. But looking at things with this particular lens, which is more comprehensive and holistic, is going to, I think it's a little bit of a shift in how we've done things, as opposed to designing programs that are sort of more one-off. They're part of the whole, but they're their own thing. And so we're going to begin that conversation and reach out to stakeholders. I really do look forward to hearing from all of you Vote Solar, Greenlining, Grid Alternatives, in terms of your feedback and other stakeholders in terms of how we consider impacts on disadvantaged communities and make sure that those underserved communities are taken care of as we move forward with these policies.
Great. Thank you, Melissa. Well, a lot to look forward to. Thank you all for the contributions. I'll take another question before we move to the audience questions. Again, we have a lot of folks on the line really interested in a career in energy policy, and so sounds like we have a lot of different paths to have gotten you all to your roles today. But are there any specific skill sets, maybe soft skills or more technical skills, that you found to be really helpful and that you really think would be key to success in a policy role for someone on the line watching, or any particular education or experience that you think might be relevant in terms of making someone more marketable for a position?
I think that coalition building is a really important skill and one that is vastly underestimated. Coalition building is not just about getting an organization or an elected official to sign on to your letter or campaign. It's about listening to the priorities and concerns of stakeholders and building a foundation for a long-term relationship. It's not about asserting your agenda on a group, but having the group collectively develop a solution that all the stakeholders feel a part of and invested in. And that takes time, and it can be really frustrating when everyone doesn't agree. But that process of dialogue and building trust is really what manifests lasting positive change. So instead of thinking in terms of how can an organization help me achieve my goal, reframing it in terms of how can I enlist others in a common vision by appealing to shared aspirations. Instead of asking what can others do for me, but instead what can we do together as a community, I think that that is the empowering question.
Great, thanks, Jessica.
I would go back.
Oh, go ahead. No.
All right, I would just go back to, you know, the common theme that we talked about earlier, which is so much of the work that we do is based on communication. So I'd say that building your communication skills, that's your verbal communication skills, as well as your writing skills, I think is tremendously important toward making you an effective advocate in this arena.
Thank you.
I would agree with both of those recommendations. Some of the things we are looking for in terms of more technical skills is people who do have modeling skills, who have a background in economics or Excel quantitative analysis. But in addition to that, I would agree with, you know, communication, strong communication skills, being able to take information that may not be accessible because it's very technical. in the world that I'm in, there's a lot of acronyms. Taking that and being able to communicate it to the layperson is a key skill that is something that I look for, and I think broadly people look for as they're hiring.
Thank you, Melissa. That's a great suggestion.
So in addition to everything that's been said so far, which I definitely agree with, and especially that translation aspect that Melissa was just talking about, I think one of the things that I find most valuable is critical thinking and really looking at new ideas with a critical eye, particularly when we're talking about low and moderate income communities. One of the things that I try to look at when there's a new idea on the table is, how is this actually going to work in real life? What kind of unanticipated barriers might show up for a low or moderate income household, for a household that doesn't speak English very well, for a household that doesn't have internet access? What kind of barriers might show up in this otherwise good-sounding policy idea that might prevent certain communities or certain types of households from being able to benefit? So I think that critical thinking in terms of projecting forward, how will this translate from an idea on paper into a program in reality, or an attempt to change the way that society operates in reality? Those are really important questions that we find oftentimes.
Great. Thank you, Stephanie, and thank you, panelists. Well, that's all the questions I have, but we have gotten some audience questions, so we'll go right into those. And audience, if you've been holding your question till the end, go ahead and type it in the Q&A on the right, and we will field those as they come in. So I have a question here from Grace. Her question is, I'm in solar sales, but want to transition to the policy team. What advice would you have for someone in my position? Well, I think you guys just all gave some good examples of good skills that would be important for Grace to think about developing. We've had some folks point to jobs on their website. Internships might be a recommendation. Anybody have anything specific in terms of a sales or marketing transition into a policy world?
I would jump in here and I'd say, fantastic job, great work, being as a fantastic salesperson in solar. You've built yourself a phenomenal foundation for doing a number of different things. And it's really great that you as a salesperson have already been building up your communication skills. That's phenomenal. Another thing that I would add on to that now, as you get interested in public policy, is start learning the rules around which public policy is made. Public utility commissions operate by a certain set of rules, and legislatures operate under a set of rules. So learning those rules and learning how to operate within them and using your phenomenal communication skills will give you a leg up in getting into that career.
Great. Okay, I will go ahead and move on to the next question from Pamela. Can anyone on the panel give an example of good community organizing as it relates to or affects energy policy? We have some organizers or some folks with organizing experience. Any examples we can think of ways that's been effective in energy policy? One example that comes to my mind might be the California net energy metering proceeding that went on last year in California, and the high, really broad coalition of support that was really driven, mostly in part, I would say, by Vote Solar kind of being the main organizer, but bringing a lot of groups into the arena, be they tribal nations, job training organizations, consumers, and really building a coalition that affected a lot of direct support and a lot of public engagement on the issue. That's one example I thought of. I don't know if anyone has any other examples or other states that might be interesting.
I think that there's an increased focus on making sure that diverse coalitions that are representative of the communities affected by that policy are really coming to the forefront. So in Nevada, I'm thinking of a press conference that Vote Solar hosted, bringing in together communities of faith, communities of color, conservatives, just bringing in a diverse coalition of partners just to be more representative of the communities affected by various policies. So I think an increased focus on having diverse, broad coalitions.
Just to piggyback on that just a little bit, I always find it interesting. I 100% agree about the diverse coalitions, and it's relatively easier to bring different interests together now through the use of online advocacy tools, online organizing tools. And I always find it interesting in California when you'll see on the one hand an environmental organization, a mainstream environmental organization, an environmental justice organization, a local community church, and a local community Tea Party chapter are all kind of on the same page about the same thing. And you sit there going, what is this issue that has this broad of an appeal to everyone? And I think that's what's interesting about solar is it's not just about changing the way that we get energy, it's about changing the way that we produce energy, which brings in those job aspects, it brings in the environmental aspects, it even brings in some of the philosophies around let's do it ourselves versus relying on a big utility to do it. So I think similar to what Jessica mentioned earlier about finding that point of connection with diverse interests, there's a lot of different points of connection around solar energy and solar policy that appeal in different ways to a lot of different kinds of people and kinds of organizations.
Absolutely. Okay, well, I think that's, we're going to go ahead and wrap it up then. That's a great high point to leave us on, and I want to thank our panelists, Melissa, Stephanie, Melanie, and Jessica, so much for your time today and your experience that you shared with the audience. I do want to mention one more time the lowincomsolar.org website that houses our low-income solar policy guide. And if anyone's watching today that would like to get more information about getting involved with Grid Alternatives, if you'd like to get up on the roof and learn to install solar with us, or more about our Women in Solar initiative, you can check out our website, and that's gridalternatives.org/women. Thanks again, panelists, so much for your time today, and have a great day, everyone. Thank you.